everyone. We've talked a lot about our relationship so far, and one of the big things that come up for us a lot is dealing with anxiety. Jess and I both deal with a lot of different things. ADHD, borderline, PMDD, a lot of different stuff throughout our life. And so we wanted to take a moment to go back through some strategies for anxiety. We know that this is still something that comes up in our life, right? Mm-hmm. We do a lot of personal work and this still comes up. We still need these refreshers sometimes. And a lot of people in our community deal with anxiety as well. So we wanted to go into kind of some tips from a couple different from an article and also some of our personal tips as well.
Yeah, so we'll start with our personal tips and then we'll go into an article real quick. We're not going to read everything in the article, but this is going to be roughly 5-ish ones we're going to give out, and then we'll give the article 2 for additional ones. But what we want to do is talk about different strategies, because I think that one of the problems when dealing with anxiety is that often we don't know how to get out of it. Yeah. And so you have to remember that anxiety is a whole body process. Mm-hmm. You're not just dealing with one problem, you're dealing with multiple. You're dealing with the fact that your body is going into fight or flight. You have to deal with the fact that your mind is probably racing. You're probably experiencing some bodily effects. And so...
Well, and this is where the mind-body connection's especially notable, right?
Mm-hmm. So...
and especially in that, you being anxious in your brain and feeling those thoughts, you're also dealing with anxiety, the sensations coming up in your body. And so if you can address, from either the body angle or... the brain angle, you can still get at the anxiety.
Mm-hmm. So the one we'll go with, we've talked about a lot on here, and this is just going to be review for people. We've done a video on this before. We've talked about mindfulness and the way meditation works. We've also talked about in the Zen segments the idea that, why mindfulness can be so helpful for basically processing and dealing with emotions. We're going to get into that later when we do another segment of that sometime. But what I wanted to share with you again is this. So this is the square breathing diagram. So essentially what you're doing is, it says 4 seconds, you can just do a count of 4, but essentially what you're doing is breathing in for the count of 4, holding for the count of 4, breathing out for the count of 4, and holding the out breath for the count of 4. Because what you're doing is you're basically calming the body down by regulating the speed of breath. Now you can do a count of 4. If you want to do 4 seconds, you can, but whatever works best for you. You can look at your watch or your phone, if you have like a stopwatch app. But this is the one that I sort of reliably use. That or breathing in through your, deep breaths in through the nose, out through the mouth, right? Just that's one we use a lot on the fly.
And both of these have a lot of variations on them. I think I've seen the square breathing one with 12, 7, 3, a couple different numbers. The breathing in and out. One of the things that my therapist taught me was try to keep going, make each breath in and out slower and slower and slower. So go as slow as you possibly can on the in and out. Same deal.
Yeah. So again, this will be online. So if you guys need it, I'll put a copy of it in the links doc. But the purpose of this is that we want to talk about the idea of, when we don't have any big drama going on, there isn't any big issues on the online left. We're not having a giant infighting thing. How do we take care of ourselves? How do we deal with this stuff? And so one of the issues is because we're all sort of anxious. We're all dealing with a lot. We, as leftists, have a tendency to, I hear you, bud. We are always dealing with stuff that we need to be aware of. It's incredibly important that we take care of ourselves. And so this can refer to either mindfulness practice, so the forms of focused attention meditation, or open monitoring meditation. We can also talk about the idea of relaxation, deep breathing like we just did. Whatever practice you want, but something that is going to get you back in your body. Another good example of these is the, mindfulness action of going through and looking at your environment. Let me see if I can find that image real quick.
Oh, yeah. The other thing with the breathing, too, is you're going to want to be doing that multiple times.
Yeah, you're going to be doing that for at least several minutes. Right? Because the goal here is to...
It'll take you a little bit to work to get your body out of that state, especially if you're pretty deep in it. This one is usually used with dissociating, isn't it? That's when you're thinking
It can be used for dissociating and also be used for anxiety.
Got it.
I'm trying to figure out where I put it because I didn't cue it like a derp. Here's a good example. I'll try to blow this up a little bit. Basically, what you're going to be doing is going through and basically reconnecting with your environment. So for example, 5 things you can see, 4 things you can feel, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. And the purpose of this is to get it back into your body, right? Psychosocialism brings up grounding techniques. Grounding techniques are really good. An example of a really good, just easy grounding technique is closing your eyes, sitting with your feet flat to the ground, doesn't matter on what floor you're at, and just visualizing the idea of roots extending from your feet into the ground, reconnecting you to the earth. And then what you can do is start practicing through that visualization. You can practice breathing, pulling in support and breathing out any of the negative, any of the anxious, things like that. That's a really good visualization technique. Excuse me, that's a really simple one. And again, I'll save this image so we can come back to it.
Yeah, and if you mix up the order of these things, don't even worry about it. Like, just keep going with it. It's really fine.
Yeah. The purpose of this is that, again, what we're trying to do is make sure that you guys have tools so that you can take care of yourself. So that's the mindfulness section. We're going to try to keep this one short and quick. The next thing is going to be us talking about, I'd like to talk about actually CBD. One of the things that has been really helpful for me and Zena's relationship is when I was dealing with panic attacks and we eventually I was diagnosed with borderline, one of the things we came to rely on was that I had a medical marijuana card. And that medical marijuana card, though I don't have it anymore, I didn't re-up it, allowed me to purchase really good quality CBD. Well, CBD on the market now has gotten a lot better. It's at Vitamin Shop and all these other places. And so we use that really regularly. There's a lot of really good evidence out there about how, cannabidiol is useful for dealing with anxiety and the ways in which it sort of re-regulates the system. It sort of re-regulates, if my understanding of it is correct, I'm not a biologist, I'm not a doctor. My understanding is what it does is it tends to re-regulate the underlying systems so that things function more effectively. It is very good for anxiety. Onset, depending on what you're using, can be upwards of 30 minutes if you're using drops and things like that. If you're using like a vaporizer, let's say you're using like a CBD specific, like say oil or fluid, and you're vaporizing that can be almost instantaneous, or at least within a few minutes. But either way, really, really useful. CBD is really helpful to have on hand. They also have gummies you can get, which are really useful. We actually give Bun CBD for her anxiety.
Yes.
They have dog safe CBD that actually really helps with her barking. And Psychosocialism says in chat, it's been used for controlling tics and Tourette's. Yes, I would agree.
Tourette's. I like it a lot for migraines and PMDD. It definitely really helps with both of those for me.
As well as chemical sensitivities.
Chemical sensitivities, yeah. Granted, I personally cannot do like marijuana or people smoking. That's a whole other like, I have no idea what people are doing, but that my body cannot handle. But as far as, actual CBD in an oil, that's helps a lot with quite a few different things. That addressing the underlying system stuff seems to be the trick there.
Now, again, anytime you start using a supplement, you should talk to your doctor. None of this should be taken as medical advice. None of this should be taken as therapeutic advice. All we're simply saying is this is stuff that we found effective for us or I found useful with working with my clients. The other thing is I want to say really quickly, is that another supplement that could be useful in this is 5-HTP. It is the precursor to serotonin.
Yep.
And it is useful as a way, in my experience, to manage depression, but I've also seen it be useful for anxiety in some cases. Ashwagandha is also a decent supplement. But again, these are supplements. So if you're going to look at, say, ashwagandha or 5-HTP or CBD, you should talk to your doctor first. And make sure that you are taking care of yourself and you're making sure you're making good decisions. So these are not, they should not be taken as medical advice, simply things that I found really effective for us. So the next thing on the list that we made was, let's see here, check for distorted thinking. So we have a series, and I know for a fact a bunch of y'all motherfuckers didn't watch it. I know. It's called the Distorted Thinking series. And in that series, what we do is we break down all types of distorted thinking that are common in a therapeutic setting and break down why this is fallacious thinking. At the end of the day, all distorted thinking is just fallacies. It's just fallacies that we trick ourselves with to make the world seem scarier, harder, and more difficult than it actually is. The need to be right fallacy, the heavens reward fallacy, the black or white thinking fallacies. These are all things that are cognitive distortions that keep us locked in. Some really good examples of ones that keep us on our anxiety, the need to be right. Let's see, catastrophizing. Black and white thinking can be one, especially when it's in relationship. This happens with borderline folks a lot, where they will, because if somebody does something they don't like or something that crosses that line, the splitting switch will flip to the other side, because now that person must be bad, which can bring up a ton of anxiety, because again, fear of abandonment. And so, yeah, so this stuff is really, really helpful. Going through and watching those videos and understanding how to look for this stuff. This is where the mindfulness and the CBD can be really helpful, is that what you could do is sort of slow down your awareness a little bit, pay attention, and just notice, okay, what is the underlying logic of what I'm thinking? This is what CBT is, right? Cognitive behavioral therapy, not cock and ball torture. Cognitive behavioral therapy is simply getting at your thoughts and changing the way you think, which changes your emotions, because obviously your emotions react to your thought patterns, and thus changing your behavior. So if we can just get you to the place where you can start critiquing and looking at your thoughts and noticing, like, okay, I'm deeply afraid I'm going to hurt my friend. Well, and I must be some terrible monster. I'm so anxious about this. Generally, people who are monsters don't worry about hurting their friend. Just saying. Like, that's a thing.
Or like, should statements are another one too.
Yeah.
Right? This belief that, like, well, everybody should be able to, put things away when they're done with it. Cool. That's a good belief. That's a good should statement, right? You believe that that's a power that everybody has, but, well, if you live with people with ADHD...
Or who are disabled.
Or who are disabled,
neurodiverse,
in a variety of ways. We see this with, like, lots and lots of folks. Then, yeah, their way of doing things might be different. It might be in a different order. It might be in a different time frame. They might need skills that they don't have yet. All of that. Obviously, just, age. So, getting at kind of some of those core beliefs and kind of going, wait a minute, is this accurate? Is this applicable?
Yeah, especially with the should statement thing, too, is also ask yourself the question, if someone should be, that is, are you making a definitive they must or an ought statement? Because, like, a good example of that is, you should brush your teeth. But that's not a must statement. You're not required by law to brush your fucking teeth. You should do it in the sense of ought. It ought to be a thing you do because that is a thing that is beneficial. You keep your teeth. In the same way, hey, should I have done better on that test? Probably, but it's more of an ought to do better on that test than it is a must do better on that test. Do you see the difference? When you're using these shoulds, you should really watch out for, are you making the must ought fallacy, right? Right, so that's a good example. So check out that playlist. I really wish you guys would watch this stuff.
That one's a really good one.
We had a lot of fun with it. This kind of gets into our number 3 here. It kind of gets into some of the other ones, but I think it's important, is embodiment. So when we talk about embodiment, Zena kind of talked about this a little bit, and they can explain their perspective on it. I think immediately when we talk about embodiment practices, things such as your... working out, things like jogging or using an elliptical can be really helpful, especially to work off energy, also very good for depression. In yoga, for example, doing very slow, very mindful yoga can be very helpful, also good for those breathing practices too, but also just good to get in your body, pay attention to your body. You had brought this one up as well, talking about sort of looking at going in the body. Do you want to talk more about your experience with that?
Which part?
The embodiment piece, the idea of like sort of paying attention to what's going on inside your body, the stuff we learn in Gestalt.
Yeah. Just kind of taking a second to kind of check in with yourself and kind of doing like a body scan almost can be like the first step, especially when I'm not sure what I'm anxious about. That's a big one, right? And so there's a couple ways that I'll do this. I might kind of notice, is there any tension? Is there any stress? Does my neck hurt? Okay. Are there any different sensations going on in my body? Is there any pain anywhere? A lot of those can be clues that there's something going on. The other checks are your basics like food, drink, water, If you're a migraine person or a migraine coming on, that can definitely trigger stuff. Or if you deal with other physical things, maybe a flare-up's coming on, right? And so you might be like, okay, now I know which thing is going on, so now I can actually treat it. But, noticing that tension, like what I'm holding on to, right? That might be the start of me going, oh, wait a minute, there is some anxiety going on. There is something that I'm dealing with, and so then you can kind of go from there and kind of start helping, to let those muscles down, let the relax happen.
Yeah. A good example of this also is like looking at like where the tension is, like finding where the tension or the difficulty is and kind of feeling into it. So if I notice I have a lot of pressure on my chest, taking a moment and really like focusing my awareness on that pressure and seeing just kind of what comes up in my mind associatively, that's really, really helpful. Another really good trick, and this is a trick that's more of an embodiment one, but I think is really great, is I learned this one from one of my supervisors. So what I want everyone to do that's watching, I want you to take your tongue and I want you to run it on the top teeth on your mouth on the outside one way. And then I want you to run it on the back of your top teeth the other way.
Like the inside of them.
Yeah. So outside, inside. Do that a couple times and notice what happens. So you should be noticing that your mouth is going to start filling with saliva, because what it does is it triggers the salivary glands. Well, one of the things that happens during some sort of fight or flight situation is that the amygdala kicks in, it starts pumping out adrenaline, norepinephrine, and all that stuff. And essentially what it does is it starts shutting down any unnecessary systems, such as, it starts causing your limbs to get a little colder, it starts causing your heart rate to increase, and it also tends to cause dry mouth.
Your body kind of sucks all the moisture back to the center of it too.
Yeah. So what happens is that when you're doing this, a really useful thing is to go through and do that trick a few times. Because when you stimulate the salivary glands, it tricks the body into going back into the parasympathetic nervous system rather than the sympathetic nervous system. Your parasympathetic is your resting state. Sympathetic is your active fight or flight one. So it's a way to shift the body back into that. Your breathing also through hyperventilation is another example of which one you're in. But if you're not able to get to your breathing, right, anyone can run their tongue on their teeth. I hear you, Bun. Hi.
Hi, puppers.
Bun's getting anxious.
She's also getting a little needy. She's like, I need attention because I'm a doggo.
So last but not least on our thing of 5 is crafts and writing. So I'll talk a little bit about the crafts part because I want to talk about the stuff that I did back in the beginning of our relationship. And then,
I can talk a little bit about
crafts and also writing. One of the big things that was super helpful when I was dealing with the beginnings of my BPD and dealing with the beginnings of panic attacks back in 2017, we had a person that was associated with our group. I won't say a friend because this person turned out to be shitty. But this person did show me a very interesting skill, and that was how to make paper cranes. So I bought, we got a whole bunch of paper, and I sat there and started making a whole shit ton of paper cranes, and I made a whole thing full of paper cranes. And this was actually a really good mindfulness exercise and a really good crafts project, because eventually you can make them into strings and do something like that. Never did, unfortunately, because I'm lazy. But the reality is that's a really good way to kind of deal with your anxiety and give yourself something to do with your hands. There are tons of other examples of this, but I wanted to share that because I think it's a really important one. Zena, of course, does knitting. Knitting
and crochet, yeah. I usually have a project with me. At this point, I find it really calming even just to hold on to my stuff, but it does give me something to do, something else to focus on, right? So kind of giving me an out from what my thoughts are doing. So I definitely find that really helpful. And there's a lot of other craft and art hobbies that can be useful too. If drawing, watercolor, painting, clay, any of these things can be a really, really great way to give yourself, a way to kind of deal with things. And you could be doing art about the anxiety, or you could just be doing it about something else completely. Maybe you just have a project you're working on.
Yeah.
And our other one was writing.
And so for me, writing, Zena does a lot of writing, did a lot of like fiction writing, and then also has done a ton of writing in journals for them. For me, writing was always journal writing. It was very much a thing where when I was dealing with the beginnings of, coming to terms with my diagnosis for BPD and stuff, it was a lot of me having to figure out ways to, write down my thoughts and all that. I still don't like writing, but I think it can be incredibly helpful.
Yeah. I think it still helps when you do need to use it, though. It is one of those tools that I think really helps when you need it. Some notes about writing. There is no right or wrong way to do it. There are a lot of different ways to journal, and you can look up different guides on it, different exercises. Not everything even needs to be in complete sentences. You could just do bullet points. You could just write out, a phrase or something that you're feeling and just doodle around it, whatever. All of this works. It can be especially useful to help kind of slow you down and actually have to deal with the thoughts that you're thinking, right? Because now they're actually like in front of you in solid form, and they're actually kind of real, right? Or at least like physical real on the page. So that's a great way to start going through and being like, okay, what am I thinking? And kind of tracking through that. One of the practices that I really like from bullet journaling is the migration every month. And that's a way to go through things, look at your calendar, have a lot of self-reflection time. But through that practice, it's been nice to take a chance to look at how I journal and how that affects things. So that way I can kind of be like, hey, what's working, what's not? And that's really strengthened a lot of my practices. So there's a lot of different ways to do writing. But I think that's a great way to give yourself a good pause, either from what you're dealing with or give yourself an out. So if you want to be like just screaming and loud, but you can't be screaming and loud, you can just scream in your journal.
Yeah. So with that said, the last thing I'll show, and this will be in the links doc, so we're not going to go over all these, but I just want to kind of hit some things. This is an article from Psych Today that talks about, how to beat anxiety. It uses this anxiety toolkit by this person, Alice Boyes, PhD. And some of the ones in here are pretty solid.
Like
put something that's out of its place in its place. Massage your hand, which will release oxytocin.
Number 3, state the emotions you're feeling as words. I feel angry and worried right now. I actually think aloud with yourself, to saying that or writing it, I actually think that's a really good one to start identifying what's going on with you.
Yeah. Take a bath. Forgive yourself for not foreseeing a problem that is occurring. Make a phone call you've been putting off. Write an email you've been putting off. These are both really good ones. Throw something out the fridge. Again, the act of being proactive, getting something completed can be really helpful. Cuddle a baby or a pet.
Baths and showers can also really help with anxiety too.
That's what I said, baths up there.
Yeah, I was just noting that. That's all.
If someone else's behavior has triggered you, try accepting that they may never know the complete reason, or that you may never know the complete reason and background behind the person's behavior, right? So you can detach from it a little bit. Question your social comparisons. This is anytime you're on social media, especially. And so on. And so you get into some of these, like, watch out for these thinking traps. This is probably distorted thinking. Our stuff's probably better. Go to a yoga class. Get a second opinion about something from someone you trust. Find something on YouTube that makes you laugh, right? Lightly run 1 or 2 fingertips over your lips. This will stimulate the parasympathetic fibers in your lips, which will make you calmer. This is also why kissing makes you calmer. And so on. Do a form of exercise you haven't done in the last 6 months, right? Something novel. You guys can go through these on your own, but we wanted to share them just because I wanted you guys to have enough things to try on your own. If the stuff we've said doesn't work for you, or you feel like it's not a huge fit, there's at least a whole list of 50 things here to try that will be helpful. So, yeah.
I think the other thing I was going to add was at various points of my life, depending on what I'm dealing with, I do find that different things work better at different times. Like, I really like square breathing, but I don't find that it's always good at helping PMDD, because PMDD is hormonal and keeps the emotions going constantly. So that's something where, like, no, CBD might be more effective in that case. And so it's okay to switch things up, try different things, and you might find that some anxiety is really good dealt with it, with a couple of these things, and maybe other things don't work for that particular type of anxiety, but something else that's triggering anxiety, might have different results than what you were trying before. So I think just give it all a try, and it's okay to change up tactics when you need to.
Yeah. All right, with that, we'll see you guys in the next one. I hope this stuff helped. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.
If you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Also, consider donating to us. You can support us on our website, transgirltherapist.org. You can also help us on our Patreon, link below, or you can become a member here on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching.